Welcome to Macmillan 180. For nearly the past 25 years, students and faculty of the University of British Columbia's Animal Welfare Program have gathered here to share ideas, learn, and enjoy lunch. To celebrate our 25th anniversary, the Animal Welfare Program hosted a series of webinars to virtually invite our diverse alumni to join us once again around the table to ruminate in room 180. My name is Megan Locke, and I work with the Animal Welfare Program. I will be the host of today's podcast. On April 3rd, we were joined by Ben, Beth, Jennifer, and Joao to discuss how to achieve change in research. Benjamin, or Ben Lecorp, holds a bachelor's in biology and a master's in animal behavior, both from France, and then completed a PhD in applied animal biology at the AWP. And he is now a lecturer at Bristol Veterinary School. His research encompasses understanding the effective experiences of animals, the practical implementation of various solutions in dairy farms, and considering sustainability challenges in animal welfare. Beth Ventura holds a bachelor's in animal science and a master's in animal and avian science, both from the US, and then completed a PhD with the AWP. She is now a senior lecturer in animal behavior and welfare at the University of Lincoln, United Kingdom. Her research interests encompass both the animal and human side of animal welfare, but more so the human side. Jennifer Van Os received her PhD in the Interdisciplinary Animal Behavior Graduate Program at the University of California, Davis, and conducted postdoctoral research at the AWP. She is currently an assistant professor and extension specialist in animal welfare in the Department of Animal and Dairy Sciences at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The research in her lab focuses on understanding, evaluating, and improving the welfare of dairy animals from biological and social science perspectives. Joao Costa obtained both his bachelor's and master's at the Federal University of Santa Catarina, Brazil, and his PhD from UBC. He has been an assistant professor at the University of Kentucky since 2017. His research group investigates the effect of pre-weaning nutrition and environment on dairy calves' early development, the feeding behavior of dairy cattle, and the use of precision technologies to make nutritional decisions. As we look back through the topics covered in these podcasts, from veterinary practice to the animal protection movement, it all comes full circle to the topic of research. The Animal Welfare Program has made a pivotal impact on the career journeys of many researchers around the world, whether they have joined us as a graduate student, as a postdoc, or as a visiting scientist or lecturer. Our 4 speakers joined the AWP at different points in their research career and for varying durations, but all have brought up many meaningful memories from their time here. Most of the speakers researched dairy cattle welfare with us, which comes up in many of their answers. So to start, when asked about a lesson that he learned at the AWP, Ben talked about being able to be recognized as an expert in his field by his colleagues.
There's one thing that stuck to me is once I started the PhD, Dan told me once, we were doing a journal club about personality traits, I think, at the time. You're the expert here, so what do you think? How could possibly be the expert? And it took me years to realize what he meant. It's true, there wasn't that many people doing anything like this in the world. And so I think it tells a lot about the fact that we don't really care in the AWP about senior people and junior people, and that we acknowledge this, that we empower students to feel that they own expertise. And that's very, very useful to fight the imposter syndrome. So I guess that's one lesson learned and something I'm trying to teach my students as well.
When asked about a recent success, Beth talked about her collaboration with AWP alumni in creating a community of practice to support researchers and educators in animal welfare.
A number of years ago, another AWP alum, Katie Proudfoot, and I, with a number of other folks, building off of their backs and their efforts, we put together a community of practice for those that teach or are involved in teaching anything related to animal behavior, animal welfare, animal ethics. People within the AWP alumni kind of network who had trod that path before me very generously shared a lot of their material and just provided a lot of support. And so we kind of wanted to pass that forward and codify it a little bit more into something a little more formal. And so now this network meets once a month And we have this large curriculum repository, and we've grown it to over 100 members, and they're scattered all over the world. And that's been something that has been a huge pleasure to help build and nurture. So I would say that is something that I would be very proud of these days.
Joao added to the conversation with some optimism that research conducted today has the potential to contribute to longer-term impact, even if the short-term effect isn't being felt now.
I think like sometimes you have to look 10, 15, 20 years ahead that, the paper that comes out today have an impact in the decades to come. So that long-term thought is also, I think, what nowadays I can see as a success.
Jennifer shared a story from her career of how she developed an idea of a video game for cow handling into a fully fledged game.
So when I started my position here 5 years ago, I was trying to get to know my Wisconsin dairy stakeholders, and I was meeting with producers to understand their challenges and needs around animal welfare. And one recurring theme was training for milkers and other cow handlers on practical, appropriate cow handling practices. And that really surprised me because there are a lot of good free resources available, but it told me that there was a need for something different and more innovative and engaging. And so this eventually led to the idea, pursuing funding, and then actually being able to kind of execute this dream of making a video game so that learners can practice cow handling in a simulated environment. And so I went from an idea to actually having a working full video game. That's been really fun. And I think that one of the nice things about academia is that there are a lot of milestones to celebrate. You have an abstract, you have a paper, you have, X, Y, and Z tangible thing. And that's one thing I really enjoy.
Besides personal successes, we can expand our view to look at animal welfare science as a field. The speakers discussed how researchers all face a major challenge getting their own research to be put into practice, especially in our changing society, but then suggested the use of social sciences to help mediate all of this change.
I find actually producers can sometimes be resistant and they think we're making these snap decisions based on one study, when really what I'm finding is we're more than 2 decades behind the research. We already know what some of these best practices are. Of course, there's need for more research, but where I really struggle, it comes to implementation and adoption among the industry. And so, and at the same time, I think there's social science work needed about public engagement. So, Beth's very famous farm visit study, they all just want to educate the consumer. And you showed that that information deficit model doesn't really hold water. And I feel like the industry really still clings to that. And you have this hypothesis about this two-way engagement and, identifying values and common ground. And I think we need to test those hypotheses more, because if we can take those messages back to the industry and show them, I think that would help with some of these missing puzzle pieces when it comes to adoption.
You nailed it in terms of my frustrations with welfare issues currently, and so the lack of implementation and the lag between research and what happens in farms. Parts of me, worries a little bit because we struggle with so much high quality research, so much efforts put into it, and still a limited change in some countries at least. Then you wonder, in a relatively stable climate, geopolitical climate as well, what will happen when all these factors start to be much more complicated and much more difficult? We have, of course, the threats associated with climate change that are coming more and more present, and what we can do to mitigate that and to adapt our systems. And it's going to require us to be creative and inventive and fast, and it's going to require also the industry to change very, very, very quickly. So it's going to definitely be the next 25 years. You made me think, in 25 years, we should be close to carbon neutral, right? I wonder what a dairy farm will look like. And with change, with the pressure to change, we will see movement. I just hope we will see movement that will be in line with providing animals with better care. The future change to me is there.
I was thinking about this question on 2 levels. The first to me is dealing with the intersection between animal welfare and climate change, and needing to reckon with the acceleration of impacts that the climate is having and is going to continue to have. I think it all comes back down to the human element. Animal welfare problems are people-generated problems, and I don't think we're going to fix them until we really engage with and work with people.
On top of their research, all our speakers discussed their roles in training the next generation of scientists. Joao talked about the importance of soft skills, and Jennifer talked about the importance of training students to embrace diverse experiences and skill sets.
one thing that I take a lot, especially for the time at AWP, is that teaching or mentoring students is beyond making them good scientists or being able to write papers, grants. So bringing that, what are you going to do in life? And at least not that everything that we do is right, but like teaching people more than just how good of a professional they are, and easing their path is fundamental. And many groups, people forget that, and creating that type of relationship is fundamental. Soft skills are fundamental. And I say that one of my big things on my career is that I never wrote a paper with Dave Fraser, but at the same time, I spent 8 or 9 years having lunch with him every day and listening what he had to say. Then I try to make that culture that the students shouldn't just learn what to do, but where and how to do things and who to be. I think that is a major thing.
Two things that I've observed. One, Ben reminded me when he said, this issue of implementation of best practices that can really vary by region. But I think that's one thing that we have to recognize is that animal welfare is global, but there is a lot of regional variation. And that's where there needs to be a lot of work. That's where I would encourage students to pursue international experiences. And then the second thing is just speaking from the perspective of an academic in the US. I think to be an effective scientist in the future, you also have to be marketable. So you learn a lot of these research skills and these soft skills and the subject matter from AWP. But just in my experience in the US, I think it's different elsewhere. You're often going to be part of an animal science department. And that means you're going to be around a lot of traditional nutritionists and geneticists and these types of people who don't often understand what it is exactly that you do. And so for that reason, I think it's really important to make sure that you do have that exposure and familiarity with more traditional animal science concepts. A piece of advice for students directly is when you're outside of the AWP, don't stick with your clique. You need to branch out. That's how you form these relationships for these future collaborations.
Ben also mentioned preparing students for novel challenges, especially when working on farms and with farmers.
It's part of providing training beyond just animal welfare and then putting the animal welfare research we do into context. Once you do that, you should, hopefully have students that have a better understanding of the pressures that come to farms and that explain why things are done this way and why it's so difficult to make them change. And so it's going to, different questions in perspective, like when do we realize it's time to stop farming in some places? Do we only wait for the market to decide that this farm's bankrupt or not? Where do we put the subsidies? All these things it's context around agriculture, but it's crucial, I think, that we are aware of them. Having more discussions broadly about what are the challenges, what are the constraints.
To end it off, Beth shared her thoughts about how her time at the AWP helped grow her scientific mind and recognize the importance of collaboration.
Something that I think was a really valuable gift was how valuable collaboration is and how important it is to collaborate with others. In Room 180, having this meeting of minds where folks at all levels of their careers can sit around the same table and exchange ideas and help each other. It was an environment that grew me as a person, but also started to help me develop a scientific mind and strengthen it. And now, I don't ever want to do science by myself. And so it's something that I hope to keep pushing forward in the spaces that I work. So collaborate. People are smarter than you. Learn from them. That's the lesson that I take forward.
Thank you for listening to our April podcast on achieving change in research. As this marks the end of our podcast series, Ruminating in Room 180, I sincerely thank you for joining us on this journey. Until next time, stay in touch with the Animal Welfare Program on our website at www.awp.landfood.ubc.ca and on our Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter social media channels.